All right, man. Abe, I appreciate you having me, man. People's Champ Vintage Versatile Vigilante collab. Sickest shop in the city, College Street. We're out here, man.
Thanks so much for coming by. Appreciate it. Good chatting with you. Have a great night, guys. Peace and love.
Okay. Versatile Vigilante, Young Vince, Uncle Vinny. We are on location today, man, with the boss of People's Champ Vintage.
Hey, guys. Abe. Thank you for having me, man.
Thank you for having me, man. It's a pleasure to be in this shop. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. So thank you very much, bro.
Yeah. Of course. Happy to do it.
100%. So kind of start off from where are we right now?
Yeah. So at People's Champ Vintage clothing store in Toronto. It's 709 College. Do a little bit of everything: men's, women's. We got stuff as far back as like the 1930s, even a bit before that. And then, a lot of newer stuff too, 90s, 2000s, all the Y2K stuff you want. And just, everything in between. Try to get a little bit of something for everyone.
Love that, man. And since it's kind of our first time linking up, I'd love to hear the origin story of how People's Champ even started. So just tell your story, man. Yeah,
so, a little bit of a long story, but originally started 8 years ago now. I was working at F as in Frank with my now business partner, Wyatt. If you guys don't know F as in Frank, legends in the vintage game, especially in Canada. Arguably the biggest names in vintage in Canada. Started out in Vancouver. Shout out to the Heifetz brothers. Again, legends in the game. We were both, me and my business partner were working for them at their Queen Street location, which is now closed. Shout out Landlord as well, the manager there, another Toronto legend. We were working there for a while. I was an assistant manager. My business partner was doing the picking for them. Kind of on the side, this was when vintage on Instagram and that shit was just really starting to become a thing. So, had just a personal page we were doing, making a little money on the side, as well as just working a normal job. No real thoughts of doing it as any serious profession. And then I just had a friend come in one day, recognize me at the store, who worked for the Scaddancourt Community Center down at Dundas and Bathurst, if anyone knows it. You might see if you walk by, so it's right before you get to Kensington Market. It's where all the shipping containers are along Bathurst. And he basically worked filling those shipping containers. And the theory for them is that it's supposed to be a business incubator type thing. So you come in there. It was, I believe, a 80 square foot space we got for $400 a month. So super tiny, but super cheap, kind of worked out. And the thought of that is you get people in, they have a lease there for, 3, 4, 6, 10 months, see if a business is viable, and then you move to a real location.
Right.
He came in and saw me at the store I was working at and was kind of hey, pretty much out of the blue, being we have a spot we're looking to fill. If you're interested in filling it, let me know. I will make that happen. Now, and from that, I basically just turned to my now business partner. I'm hey, man, you want to start a vintage clothing store? And that was probably right before Christmas of 2016, Christmas 2017. By January of the next year, we had the space. And so basically just turned around that quick on it. Kind of fell backwards into a lot of it. I'll have people sometimes ask me about starting a small business, and I'm in certain respects the wrong person to ask because I did it. I guess it's always kind of done by the seat of your pants and you sort of do it as you go. But we didn't have a name for the business before we signed the lease for the space, had no name for the business.
Love that.
I think we came up with the name probably days before the business opened. Just kind of spitballing shit. We both grew up as big wrestling fans, we were 90s babies, so The Rock and all that.
Attitude
and that's
era, man.
Yeah, exactly. Stone Cold. And that's the name. People's Champ is an homage to The Rock. And then as I said it the first time, I'm oh, that kind of sounds good. Sounds a little more interesting than other shitty names we threw out there. And then so it was within a month we basically had created the business, put together a shitty first logo just using free PDF software just to slap something together. And back then we were getting our clothing just buying from Value Village even. We weren't really sourcing anything in weight like we do now.
Right.
It was just me taking a giant duffel bag, hockey bag, and I'd spend all day on my days off going to every Value Village in the city and spend 12 hours just going thrift shopping, spend the whole day, spend $150 to fill up this giant bag with 40 plus pounds of clothing, whatever I could fit in it. And you'd find good stuff. And again, this was like, vintage was definitely a thing still at that point. Like it was bigger than it had been, but not as big as it was now. So like you could still find good stuff at Value Village, like, or like the different like charity shops and shit like that. Like you were still finding solid stuff. I think definitely better than you would find now. But we quickly realized doing that, we're like, okay, this is not a long-term option for us to get clothing. We need to figure out a better option for getting stuff. And so we eventually able to find our way into rag houses, which are sort of the place where most larger vintage stores get their clothes.
Okay.
They're basically just giant warehouses you'll see. Toronto happens to be a hotbed for them. There's like dozens and dozens of these in Toronto. They're in your like Scarboroughs, your Saugas, your Bramptons, anywhere kind of outside of the city in like the more factory areas, factory districts. And from the outside, like they literally just look like any other factory. Like you wouldn't tell from looking at it. But basically all these people do is they just bring in millions of pounds of clothing. They bring them in just like freighters full of clothes in giant bales, like a bale of hay, but it's a 1,000-pound bale of clothing. And they'll bring these in. They're bringing in millions of pounds. They'll basically then just go bring in this bale, cut it open, dump it on a conveyor belt. It goes zipping by us, and we're just picking off the good stuff from the conveyor belt as it goes. And so, on any given day, we're looking through tens of thousands of pounds of clothing to like maybe buy 100 pounds worth.
Right.
So, we're picking out less than a fraction of 1%.
Needle in a haystack.
100%. And that's basically then how we then fill this store. So everything you see here has been hand curated by us, hand picked by us. I always would describe it as like if you took the best 1% of the 1% you'd find at a Value Village and like filled a whole store with it, you'd end up with something like this. And so yeah, once we sort of figured that out, it was then just continuing to build. We went from this spot at Dundas and Bathurst to a slightly bigger but still really tiny spot at Dundas and Claremont, where we were again. First 2 years we were starting out, we just did them during the summer because obviously if anyone who lives in Toronto or Canada at all knows, in the wintertime, no one's on the street, no one's walking around.
Hibernation.
Like, yeah, and we were so early, right, that like, we had a couple hundred followers on Instagram. That was still building. And so it was all walk-by traffic. So like, there's no point doing this during the winter. We're not going to get enough people in here. So we would sort of just like close up shop, rent a storage unit for the 6-month kind of breaks, keep buying stuff and all of that in the meantime. Then yeah, moved to the slightly bigger location, did that for a summer. Really was like, okay, this is a real thing. This has real potential. At that point, we were both still working at Effers and Frank at this other store, vintage store, kind of just moonlighting, doing the both. Sure. I'd actually gone back to school to George Brown for a fashion management degree. And we sort of decided at the end of the second summer of sort of trial periods, so we're like, look, we're either going to do this or we're not. So I quit. We both quit our jobs. I dropped out of school. And we went to go focus on this full time. And from there, we got a store in Parkdale. We shared a space with Play Dead Cult, great artist in the city, if anyone wants to check him out. And so we sort of subletted the front half of his store, again, kind of continuing this idea of like trial basis a little bit. And like, when you start a business, it's a lot of commitment. The startup costs are immense. Like it's, even just our basic expenses year on year, like we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, $100,000 plus every year just to fill the store and keep the lights on. So to start that from nothing is always really hard. So we were able to figure out a situation where the rent wasn't crazy, the store was kind of ready to go, we could mitigate all those costs to get the startup going. And then got started off in Parkdale, and that would have been like probably 2019. So got, a good year, 18 months in before COVID, which obviously then kind of stepped everything back a little bit. Stuck it out over those 2.5, 3 years of lockdown, open, shutdown, open, which again, obviously just made things super difficult. Like, silver lining is vintage blew up a lot in that time, especially like online vintage, online marketplaces, things like that. Like a lot of people are selling on Instagram in ways they hadn't before. Like people doing lives and doing live auctions. Like there famously during that period was a Disney Aladdin shirt that sold for like $7,000, which, people have since tracked it that like the value on that's dropped way down. So it's like clearly a effect of the market in that time, but like it was blowing up like crazy then, which sort of allowed us to keep the lights on and all that. And then after COVID, we sort of felt we could keep moving, keep growing, and then moved into this space. So it's our first like solely us location, not sharing it with anyone else. And it's been a good move. You know, it's one of those things, like anytime, sort of the whole nature of the business is being kind of just jumping at opportunities and taking that risk and like kind of just saying, hey, fuck it. Like either we're going to do this and it's going to fail, or we're not going to do this and it's going to fail. So like would rather try and at least know we did what we could or did what the options were, as opposed to just sitting here feeling like, well, you know, I just let it go and let it pass. And like, I end up just working some boring day job I don't want to do. And yeah, that more or less led us here. So we've been in this location now just a bit over a year. Still just trying to get our footing in the neighborhood and all that, like continuing to grow. Obviously, when you do move, you lose all your regulars and all that. Though, moving from Parkdale to Little Italy, it's not crazy far, but far enough that, you know, the same people who live in the neighborhood aren't necessarily going to shop there as well. But it's been good. And, you know, I think as well, just like the city shifts a lot, and neighborhoods that are vibrant and popping and have a lot of shit going on changes really quickly in Toronto. And I mean, especially COVID sort of accentuated that all around. Like you saw a lot of neighborhoods turn over like crazy. Yeah. So for us, it worked well as an opportunity, and it's sort of just trying to build from here. And then, you know, whether or not we'd open a second store in the city is sort of the next big question as far as growth, is like another store, more employees, how you grow from that. I mean, but as we were even talking about a bit before we hopped on camera, like you get caught in this loop of, to grow a business, any business, you need capital. But to get the capital, you have to be growing as a business. And so figuring out where's that in between of, is it, you know, you spend a year without to save a little bit? Do you go the loan route? Do you try to get a grant? And like, how do you get that money to hire an employee to give you more free time to do the other shit to grow the business? Right. And it's that, and then it's letting go as well, too, as you grow. Like this is, for 7 years, been just me and my business partner. Have people in and out. We've had interns through like George Brown who've worked with us. I've had like close friends pop in on days where we're busy, we can't keep this, we can't be here.
For sure.
You know, an emergency comes up, you have them come in, but like a real full-fledged employee, we haven't gone that road yet. And that's a whole thing too, of just like, you have to sort of accept that they're not going to care as much as you. They can. Anyone out there who's ever worked a part-time job or any job that you didn't love, you know you didn't care as much as the owners did or your bosses did, just the nature of it. So it's like coming to terms with that, of like figuring out, okay, like what's the right amount? How do you get someone who's kind of into it? We are lucky a little bit in that we are so small. We can make legitimate offers and promises to people being like, hey, like come and work for us. We don't have an assistant manager. We don't even have a manager. Like grow with us. Make yourself indispensable, and like we'll make a job for you. And like, you know, we'll grow into a business with you. And yeah, like advice to anyone young out there looking to do stuff. People want quick success quickly, and like it can work that way. It doesn't normally. Sometimes you gotta put the time in, you gotta put the work in. You know, not that you should work for free. Everyone should be compensated for what you do, but sometimes you gotta maybe start off in a side of the business or a side of a business you don't love and prove yourself, and you know, show that you're trustworthy, show that you're competent, show that you're valuable, right? Like I'll say that, I've said that to every intern we've ever had. You know, come here and be like, hey, you know, like the internship is obviously through your school, you're not getting paid for that, but like do good work during the internship that makes me have to pay you afterwards. Real shit. Because if you are doing enough during that internship where I'm like, oh, you being here 20 hours a week is making me X amount of dollars, I will give you money to keep making me that X amount of dollars, whatever it is. And like the more you can do, the better you can do it, the more value you can create as an employee, the more employable you are. And the more indispensable, as I said, you become. And like, you know, make yourself indispensable enough, you can become a partner. Like I've seen that happen with a lot of people doing small businesses where they're trying to grow and they find someone who's growing with them, and then suddenly that guy who's running a business by himself is now running it as a partnership, and now they're growing together, and this person's come in, and like that's so often how the story goes. Is you just sort of have to be willing to put in a little bit of extra time to make it work.
100%. Shout out to the College Street.
Hi guys.
Love it. There we go. Super raw. Unreal fucking story, bro.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. It's crazy to look, going through it step by step after the fact. I forget how long it's been going. I'm 30 now. Sort of started doing this when I was 21, 22, and started the business a few years after that. Like
you got stripes in this game now.
Yeah, almost 20 years between me and my business partner, which definitely makes me feel a lot older than I think I actually am.
But with that comes amazing experience. And you know what I really liked about your story is that you kind of touched on it where it's like, I don't know how to tell people to start because I didn't know how, but you started, you know, and I loved your, the taking advantage of the small space. Let's try it out. I think that's a very underrated strategy. Because I think we think, oh, if we're doing it, we got to go all in all at once. When in reality, you don't really need to. Why not start slow?
Yeah. No, 100%. And I mean, it's funny because there's a side of that, but there's always that balance because, yeah, definitely you have to start small, but then part of it is you have to take that risk.
Yes.
Like that was a big part of it. You know, like I definitely have invested considerable amount of my savings early on, or like, you know, it cost us $20,000 to move from Parkdale here.
Just moving costs.
Yeah, well, this place, the way you see it now, is not what it looked like when we moved in. We had to get all the walls redone. The people who'd worked here or had a spot here before had just done these like shitty shelving units that they just like installed improperly.
Right.
So when we took them off, it ripped all the like front layer of the drywall and all that shit off. And so that was a ton of money. Just coming up with first and last.
For sure, man.
A bunch of extra money. Then moving costs, racks, all this other shit. Plus the time you're just closed as a business. Like it is an expensive thing to have to go do. So like, you know, there are obviously the sacrifices in that as well. But yeah, I agree with you. I think you're right. Like I have this thought a lot, and I'm sure you're the same way, where like so much of what you do now has to be online, it has to be on social media. And it can be defeating sometimes, especially if you're not at where you want to be at and you're looking at other people and you're like, damn, like they're getting so many views, they're doing so well. But it's easy to forget that no one ever posts no one ever posts themselves not doing well.
100%.
Right? You're only ever going to see people posting their wins. Generally speaking, you know, there are a few people out there who I do see who are honest about it and will post their losses and their wins and they keep it 100. But like most people don't do that. Facts. Most people are only out here posting when things are good or lying about things being good, right? So like,
and oftentimes they don't have, like, for you, your shop to me, especially in the summer, is going to be this awesome community presence. Yeah. When you're just posting clout photos, well, that's sure you get that side of it, but there's a real life to live, and we all know that. It's a little deeper than what we see. Oh, yeah. And that's why I enjoy talking to people like yourselves, because you have a true story. You've been through these ups. You've put your own money up. You've put your face on a brand. Like, that takes a lot of balls to do. So for the city, it's very, very important, man. I appreciate what you guys are doing.
Oh, yeah. I'm happy to do it, man. Again, for me, it was like I got out of university and I'm like, I don't want to work a 9 to 5. I don't want to work for someone.
Were you always like that?
Not really. Like, I mean, I was in a lucky position where I had money that was put aside for me to go to university. Not a ton, but enough. But my parents' deal with me was like, hey, you graduate high school and you get into schools. You don't have to go, but if you're not going, you're on your own.
Sure.
So, like, if you want this support, it's only if you go to school. Like, we save this money. Because, again, I think, you know, our parents' generation came from a time where it was like, you get a bachelor's degree and you're good.
Yeah.
You will find a job, you will find a career, you'll be set. And that's not the case anymore. And that's even something I'll say to like younger people who come in the shop or just like younger cousins of mine I'll talk to. Like, university's not bad. You can go to university and it can be good, but like you shouldn't just go because you think you should go. And that's kind of what I did. Like, I'd graduated school. I was lucky enough to somehow fucking fall into solid enough grades that I got, you know, into Ryerson, U of T, a couple other schools. Always lived in the city, grew up downtown in the city. Actually was born just around the corner from here.
Nice.
So I knew I wanted to stay here. So I'm like, fuck it, let me go to school. Basically just picked a major at random. I did the same thing my brother had done, which is political science. Did that, got the degree, and about the time I was finishing up the degree, I'm like, oh, I fucking hate this. I'm going to finish it because I'm 4.5 years in, and I'm like, why would I drop out now? But I'm like, I don't like this. I don't want to work in this field. I know I could honestly probably make more money working in that field than I make right now doing this, but I'd be incredibly unhappy. And I grew up with a dad who sacrificed a lot for me, working a job he fucking hated, working a job and going to school and working contract work all at the same time so me and my brothers could have a good life. But he hated it. It's not, he wanted to do art. He wanted to paint and do things like that. And so I was like, something that resonated with me a lot growing up. So I'm like, and I'm lucky enough to say that I want to follow passion than money. I get that different people's situations aren't always like that. Like sometimes you have to just make ends meet and that becomes a priority. But if you have the ability to like do what you want to do and do what you love. I think that's important as well. And I see a lot of people who make amazing money doing jobs they hate, and they get burnt out, and it's not sustainable. And like you go to hate life eventually, because like every day, the majority of your life is still working, right? Like it's the majority of the day, 5 days of the week, you're going to do something you don't like. And like, you know, if you're making $250,000, sure, that makes it really easy, but like most people aren't going to make that much money. So if you're making good enough money or good money, but it's still not life-changing money and you hate what you're doing, you have to at a certain point ask, like, is this worth it? That was sort of, I saw the writing on the wall that like those are the two paths for me. Is like I can go work a job, figure out something where like, again, you know, bachelor's degree, good job, good enough grades, all that, could make it work. I'm like, well, let me try something different. Let me go. And I kind of just fell into clothing with that. Like I always knew I wanted to do something visually, something kind of with an artistic side to it. As I said, like my dad really wanted to be a painter. That's what he wanted to do. My mom worked in art galleries growing up and worked for City TV before she got pregnant with my brothers in the 80s. So I always had a bit of that streak in me.
Right.
And growing up, I actually thought it was like photography was a big thing I was really into. I'd gone and got a minor in photojournalism at Ryerson, going to school for there. So I thought that was going to be a path. I was considering being like war photojournalist, doing something like that. That could be, you know, be really engaging and interesting and all that. And it just never quite coalesced the way I wanted it to. And I quickly realized as well, and it's a crazy thing to say, is like a 21-year-old in university that was too behind the game already. And I looked at the other people doing this and I'm like, oh, you were doing photos in early high school. You were on your school paper and all that. And like, not that I couldn't have made it work, but I just realized I was already like 4 years behind. Competition's not the right word, but all my peers.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, do I love it enough to want to really make all this up? And I didn't. And like photography was interesting and something that intrigued me and I'm still interested in it. But I knew it wasn't the right fit.
Right.
And then, yeah, I had basically just a friend get me a job at F.S. and Frank, and that was sort of the start of all that. Like, that was kind of how I fell into clothing, which is even more kind of back to what I was saying about, like, falling into it sometimes. Is like, this was never the plan. This was, I had a friend who knew the manager who got me the job. A couple years later, I get this connect, and it kind of all snowballs from there. But certainly around the time I was graduating university, if someone was like, what do you think you're going to be doing? Owning a clothing store, probably... not even forget about on the list, like wouldn't even have come to mind as an option. Like, which I think, you know, you talk to a lot of people, especially who work for themselves, is probably more often the case than people realize that like sometimes it is just figuring it out as you go and like you take the opportunity. When an opportunity presents itself, like jump at that and like let that determine then what you're going to do.
That's a great way to look at it because you're absolutely right. Like not every day is a linear path.
Not at all, yeah.
But you seem like someone that never closed paths in your head. Like, who knows what comes of it? I think that's a great way to be, especially when you see something, to your point, you're ready to take advantage of it, take that opportunity. Who knows, man? Who the fuck knows?
And I was lucky enough, too, that I had a lot of older people that, you know, again, not even necessarily in, some people in the vintage world and who ran other shops who I could kind of bounce things off of, but even, you know, this artist who I subletted his space from, who's been, you know, doing his own thing. Like he dropped out of school 16 to make art and he's been doing it and doing his own thing in the city for 30 plus years now. And just soundboarding off him as someone who had done that route of be your own boss and make it work. And, you know, asking him like, you know, how you doing a startup and getting it going and like having that side of it is always useful. And I always recommend to people, like, try to find people you can talk to who have done it before and made the mistakes you've already made. But it's the same thing with him. That's like, you know, he's been doing it for 30 plus years now and in different capacities. At one point, he was doing lots of screen printing on T-shirts and he was doing physical art and he is designing people's restaurants. And like, he's just kind of figured out a lane for himself in this case where he can be creative and then find someone to pay him to be creative. And I think that's always what it is. It's like, you don't necessarily know what it is you're going to be good at or what people are willing to pay you to do.
Right.
But if you keep trying different shit, something will find out. Like, I think everyone is talented enough if they commit themselves to doing something that they'll find a lane for themselves.
I think if you're just willing to try and make yourself potentially look stupid, you'll find something eventually, man. I don't know if you're a fan of Nardwuar.
Oh, I love him.
Legend.
Yeah.
He got interviewed, and it was just like a 3-minute thing, and he told a story of like when he was first starting, he would be like last. If there was 200 people, he'd be last. Then years go by, 100 people dropped out, so now he's 100th. And then years go by, 50 people drop out. He's fit, and then he just keeps going until he's like, no one else was around. I'm still doing it, and the point was just keep fucking doing it. And I think it's a cliche, but it's really true, man.
Dude, persistence and like stick-to-itiveness, as much as that's not really a word.
It's a great word.
Is so much a part of it. It really is just the commitment to doing it. And again, it's easier said than done. Like, there's definitely been days I've sat here and been like, do I want to keep doing this? Especially, you know, during COVID was, for a lot of people, a dark time. And, you know, like, in the grand scheme of things, I was very lucky with how things turned out with me. You know, got through it with good health and all of that. And, like, could have been way worse. But, like, I think for anyone who was running a business during that time, or a lot of people who were running a business during that time, it was hard. And you're sitting here, and especially for me, like, part of what I love doing this is, like, I love being in a store and meeting people. And, like, if I want to just facelessly sell vintage, I could do that. I could just run an online store that I have no interaction with customers, or just do wholesale, which a lot of people do, and you can make good money doing. But I think sooner or later you get burnt out on that. Like,
for sure, man.
Part of it is the interaction and the people. And so, like, during COVID, there was none of that. So, like, there were definitely days there where you're like, fuck, do I want to keep doing this? But at a certain point, too, you kind of, almost to a degree, paint yourself into a corner where it's like, well, I don't know what the fuck else I would do now. Like,
and you know
my resume is going to look weird as fuck when it's like last 7 years is just owning a store. Like, I don't know how applicable that is.
Yeah, you kind of, like, you've gone too far at this point. Let's keep going. A little bit
pot committed, yeah.
But you know what, too, man? I like that you touched on that, because it goes back to our, like, Instagram talk of, bro, sometimes you love what you do, but not every minute of every day.
You're never going to love it.
And that's life, too. You can't just, like, fold and, I'm going to do something else because today I'm having a shit day. Like, you got to come back tomorrow. If you fucking hate it, okay, make an adjustment. But I think it's a flaw when we think, if I do this different, I'm going to love every aspect of it. I don't think that's true, bro.
Oh, exactly. I think, like, a big lie that gets told a lot is like, if you love what you do, it's not really work. That is bullshit. Take this from someone who loves what they do. It's still work.
It's work, man.
If it wasn't work, I would just sit at home and get paid, and that would be fucking dope. But no, it is work. There's work you have to do. It's enjoyable work, and there's a lot of it that doesn't feel like work. You know, like when I'm finding really fucking cool clothes and amazing shit that's 100 years old, or shit that's super, like, interesting or reminds me of my childhood, or I know is worth a ton of money. Like, that doesn't feel like work. That's fun.
Yeah.
But, you know, when I'm busting my ass to get stuff, or, you know, carrying hundreds of pounds of clothing to laundromats, like, there's lots of parts of it that are work. Or the really slow days, or the days you're dealing with dickhead customers. Like, there's lots of times where it's still work. And no matter what you do, no matter how much you love it, shit, even an athlete, right? Like, they always say, it's like, you don't play them for the games, you pay them to practice.
Yeah.
That's their work.
Yeah.
Or, like, the physio, the weight room. Like, I'm sure there's exceptions, but, like, even the greatest athletes, there's part of being an athlete. They don't like going to do media day or whatever it is. There's always going to be parts of it, no matter how much you love it, that is still work.
Absolutely, man. I really enjoy these types of conversations because it sheds light on everything. You know, there's huge pros to being your business owner. You have your own show, you do what you want to do, but you are the one. Like, if you don't do it, it's not getting done. You're an employee, the company will survive without you. The store, it's your business, bro.
No, exactly. And I just like, you know, when people ask, like, what's it like owning a business? I'm like, that's my main thing I'll say is, like, it's the double-edged sword of, it's awesome that I can make my own hours, and if I truly am just not feeling it on a day, I don't have to come in, and all those things. Like, that part is awesome. But the flip side is, if something goes wrong, it's only on you.
Yep.
There's no higher up to talk to. There's no HR to talk to. There's no boss. You know, I'm my business partner, and we can talk about it together. But, like case in point, I don't have my phone on me. We came in on Saturday, and our lights had fallen out of the ceiling, right? And, like, if I was working at a store, I'd be like, call the boss, call the manager, and be like, hey, that's not, like, I'm just an employee. That's not my fault. I'm immediately on the phone to whatever emergency contractor I can find, figure someone out. And again, this is, you know, noon on a Saturday is supposed to be our biggest money-making day, and I'm here. It's supposed to be my day off, mind you. Like, I'm not in the store that day. And I'm spending 3 hours on the phone with handyman to try to get them to come in and fix that. So, like, that's this other side of it, too. That as great as it is, like, when shit goes wrong, that's on you. If there's flooding, fires, God forbid, any shit like that, that's on you. There's no outside accountability that's going to take it on. Yeah.
Terrific example, man. Really, really great example. And that's one of those things, like, you could just cry and not get the lights fixed, but who does that help?
Well, I was thinking about this not long ago. That I'm like, what's the biggest thing I've probably learned or gained as a skill doing this? And it's honestly problem solving, and that's like the most translatable thing. No matter certainly for any small business owner, but no matter what you're doing, if you're doing anything for yourself, if you're a musician, if you're an artist, photographer, you own a store, no matter what it is, it's problem solving, right? Like, let's say you're a photographer, you're working a gig, and your lens gets cracked. You have to figure that out. Yep. Like, if they paid you to shoot a wedding and you don't have a working camera, you got to find your nearest homie with a working camera, or, you know, figure out if you can make your cell phone work or whatever. But, like, you can't just give up that gig. And, like, that sort of is something I think that when you just work a job and work for someone, depending on your specific job and your duties, you maybe don't have to deal with that as much, right? Like, if you're working in an office and your computer fucks up, you just go to IT. That's their problem to fix it. Or, like, you know, something else happened, you know, you have a problem with your coworker, you go to HR. Whereas, like, when you work for yourself, it's like, yeah, it's on you. You're the one fixing it. And you kind of got to be a bit of a jack of all trades as well. Like, you know, the amount I've had to learn about, like, general repairs, electrics, like SEO marketing, websites, social media, all this other shit that isn't selling vintage clothing, but is necessary when it's your own thing. Like, you really start to realize, like, there's all these other facets you can learn.
You're in, like, 10 university programs all at once, owning a shop.
Just keep getting those 10,000 hours in 10,000 different disciplines.
Literally.
Yeah.
No, that's super real, man. And a question I wanted to ask you, too, as a business owner, the importance of staying calm. Is that something that...
Yeah, 100%. Like, exactly what I was saying, you know, when problems arise like that, or just, you know, when there's, like, financial bad breaks that come, like, you know, obviously if anyone has to pay their taxes kind of around that time this year, like, it's very different when you work for yourself. Like, even from the side that, like, I'm having to deal with the CRA directly remitting sales taxes and stuff that gets paid back. But then your income tax, I have to save that all up in advance, right? Like, I'm not getting a paycheck that automatically goes to the CRA. I have to take money out of what I'm earning. So if things are a little short one year, you might get hit with an $8,000 bill come tax time, and, like, shit like that. And it's really easy to fold. Like, we've definitely had moments at lots of different stages or steps down the path of shit going wrong. The place we're going to get clothing is closing. Our prices are going up. All these different things where it's like, yeah, your options are panic or make it work. And, like, you kind of have to go the other one. Like, I think one of the biggest things, and again, it's like you have to be fortunate enough to have this mindset and to feel confident in it. But, like, I often try to go with, like, well, what's the worst thing that could happen? And, like, for me, it happened to be something I actually developed early on in school when I'd see a lot of other, like, classmates and shit freaking out about grades and tests and all these things. And I'm just like, in my mind, I would just break it down. I'm like, well, what's the worst thing that happened? I fail this exam. Okay, so what?
Yeah.
What's the worst thing that happens? I fail that exam.
I'm not going to die.
I failed the course. Okay, so what?
Yeah.
Am I going to fail this year? Am I going to fail? Like, it's, and you quickly realize if you really break it down step by step that the worst thing that could happen is usually not that bad. It usually can be figured out. We're lucky enough to live in a country where, like, there is a lot of support if you can find it and if you go look for it. That can be small things even, right? Where it's like, there's people willing to, like, let you defer bills and payments. Like, even if you get, like, a giant, like, financial burden that comes on you, like, there's ways you can mitigate that.
There's options, man.
Exactly, yeah. It's like, that's a big part of it, I think, is just realizing, like, it's usually not as bad as you think, and it's almost never as bad as it feels in the moment. And, like, if you take a minute to step back and really break it down and be like, okay, what's the worst way this could go, and what would happen if it went that way? You sort of start to realize, like, okay, it's not that bad. It's not good. It's not what we want it to be, but, like, this could honestly be way worse. It's rarely life or death, and that's really the only.
Live to fight another day,
and that's really the only thing that should be truly inherently stressing and, like, make you really worried is if, you know, your health is severely in jeopardy, or someone you knows, or something like that, where there's, like, real bodily harm that could occur. Everything past that, like, of course, it's easy to say is, like, for me, because I do have a roof over my head, and if you don't, it's a very different situation. Yeah. But, like, those sort of examples aside, like, usually it's just not that bad.
Yeah.
Or not as bad as you think it is.
I think you said it really well earlier in the interview when you said you can either do it and fail or not do it and fail. And fuck, man, the doing it is probably at least more fun.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, there's someone, I won't even try to attribute it because I don't know who said it, but there's, like, a great quote basically being like, you'll always learn more from failing than succeeding. Right? Like, because there's a million reasons you can succeed, right? Like, I know lots of people, not that they don't deserve their success, but like, they got really fortunate breaks. They happen to have a thing blow up in a way that just like exploded their business, or they happen to find a couple right connects that just opened up 1,000 doors, or they were in the right spot at the right time. Like, so much of that you can only at times learn so much from success, but every failure teaches you a million things not to do, and that gets you closer to the right direction, right? And like, so much of it, I think, of figuring out the right way to do something is looking at what was the wrong way to do it and like how to learn from that. And like, you know, even whether it's like social media and like posting something and being like, oh, like this thing that I spent all this time on, I thought it was going to do great numbers, it really didn't. Okay, so you can be depressed about that, and then there's always time to be depressed, and I think that's also a valid thing too, that like, you can sit in something and be upset with it.
Like, feel your feelings.
Yeah, exactly, right? You shouldn't just brush something off. Like, that's not healthy either, but like, take a minute, feel what you have to feel, and then look and be like, okay, well, why didn't this do well? What can I do differently about this? What's different between the one that didn't do well and the one that did do well? Or I see someone else doing something and I'm trying to recreate it and it doesn't go as well as they did it. Okay, well, what is the difference here? Like, why did theirs do so much better than mine? And things like that.
Yep, and let's go.
And like, you can learn so much that way.
Let's try it again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and just keep trying. And like, persistence is huge, right? And just like, keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it. History is littered with people who didn't succeed until way late in their lives. Like,
facts.
I think it's really easy now to get on this idea, oh, I want to be successful by 30, you know, retiring early and all that shit. And it's like, there's lots of people we now consider incredibly successful who weren't that at all, and like took forever to blow, and like it was years and years of grinding and failure and switching careers and trying this, that, and the other, and it was only after 30 years did they finally lock in on what worked for them.
100%.
And it's like, you know, and if you don't think about that, it's really easy to get depressed in like a state you're in if you are trying and failing, and like and it doesn't feel good, right? Like, there's something, again, for anyone who's starting a business, like, there's going to be moments where you put your heart and soul into it and it's not working the way you want to do, and it's going to be tough.
Yep.
And those are going to be the moments you sit there and you're like, fuck, do I want to keep doing this? Do I want to work? Like, I probably work, you know, conservatively 55, 60 hours a week, right? And like, and that's not even really factoring in the fact that I'm never really not working.
Yeah.
Like I said, right? Like, I had my day off and this shit happened in the store, and like, fuck your day off. Like, you're working. Yep. Or like, you know, I could be home asleep at 3 a.m. If I get a call from the cops that someone's broken into my store, I'm working immediately. 100%. There's no going back to bed. So like, there's a side of it at times when you work for yourself, you're going to be working so hard, you're going to be burnt out and all that, and there's going to be tough moments. But like, you know, again, it's a cliche, but like, tough times don't last. Tough people do, and there is a truth to that. That like, if you keep persevering, more often than not, you'll make it through to the other side.
Facts. R.I.P. Scott Hall, man. Bad guys don't
exactly.
Bad times don't last. Bad guys do.
Oh, exactly.
Fuck yeah. But yo, a ton of gems in this interview, Abe. I really, really appreciate it, man.
It's my pleasure, man.
I want to give you a chance. Anything you want to promote with People's Champ coming up? I know you had some events recently. Floor is yours.
Yeah. Anyone into vintage clothing? I want to check us out. The socials, People's Champ Vintage. That's Instagram and TikTok. Got the website, peopleschampvintage.ca. Got about 1,000 items up there. Or come check us out in store for all the newest shit. 709 College Street. We're open every day at noon. And anyone out there looking to start their own vintage store, we do wholesale as well. So if you're interested in that, just hit us up. Can always make things work no matter what size you're looking for. Always can be amenable for that kind of stuff as well, too.
Love it, man. Shout out to People's Champ. Follow on IG, Versatile Vigilante. We're out here. Abe, I appreciate you, bro. Shout out Composed by Kyle in the background, of course. We're out here, man.